Welcome to the Part S channel. Today we explain Deuteronomy chapter 26 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're going to look strictly at the text itself, unpacking the physical actions, the historical declarations, and the really powerful agreements found right here in this specific chapter. It's a fascinating text, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for this explainer. We'll be covering the welcome and brief context, the firstfruits ritual, the third-year tithe, the mutual declaration, key ideas and clarifications, and then we'll wrap it all up with some lessons and a quick recap.
All right, Section 1, Welcome and Brief Context.
So, to really understand what's happening here, picture this. The Israelites haven't actually entered the Promised Land yet. Right now, they are camped out on the plains of Moab, literally just looking across the Jordan River. And Moses is delivering his final speeches to them. Now remember, he's 120 years old, and he knows full well he won't be crossing that river with them. The people listening to him right now, they are the new generation. These are the folks who grew up out in the wilderness, eating manna that fell from the sky. They have never farmed a single day in their lives. So what he's giving them aren't just dry rules. They're his final, urgent preparations for a totally new, settled agricultural way of life. Chapter 26 is basically their instruction manual for how to properly transition from being wandering nomads to becoming successful, settled landowners.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Firstfruits Ritual. Now, what's incredibly fascinating about this opening is the required physical action right after they possess the land and harvest their very first crop. Moses introduces this concept of bikurim, the first fruits. He basically says, look, when you enter the land and settle it, you have to take some of the first fruits of all that you produce from the soil. You don't just leave it sitting out in the field, and you absolutely don't eat it right away. You are commanded to physically put it in a basket, literally leave your farm, and travel to the specific place the Lord will choose as a dwelling for his name. Just imagine that psychological shift for a second. After decades of your food literally falling from the sky, you finally grow your own food with your own two hands, but your very first act has to be giving the first and the absolute best of it away.
The whole process Moses describes is this incredibly intentional physical pilgrimage. Step 1, you possess the land. Step 2, you gather those very first signs of a successful harvest into a basket. Step 3, you travel to the chosen place, which, as we know, would eventually become Jerusalem. And you know, this isn't just a casual drop-off on your way to somewhere else. It involves real effort and travel time. You present yourself to the priest, who happens to be in office at that time. Fourth, as you hand over the basket, you have to recite a very specific historical declaration out loud. And finally, the priest takes that basket, sets it in front of the altar, and you bow down before the Lord and rejoice in all the good things God has given you. It's this highly engaging, fully physical act of worship that requires absolute participation.
But here's the catch. Just handing over the basket isn't enough. The farmer actually has to verbally recite a specific, incredibly humbling historical summary to the priest. You literally stand there and recite the famous Hebrew phrase, Arami Oved Avi, which translates to, "My father was a wandering Aramean." This is directly referring to their ancestor, Jacob. Think about Jacob's life for a minute. He had to flee from his brother Esau, he worked for years and years under Laban in Aram, and he was constantly struggling with famine just to survive. He had absolutely no permanent land to call his own. As a successful farmer, you have to speak this history out loud before God, openly acknowledging that your ancestors were vulnerable, landless refugees who ultimately had to go down to Egypt just to survive.
So the crucial point here is that this declaration condenses hundreds of years of history, all the way from Jacob to the Exodus, into this brilliant, brief script of thanksgiving. The farmer is acknowledging this massive narrative arc. We started as landless wanderers. We went to Egypt and grew numerous, but then we were violently oppressed and enslaved. We absolutely couldn't save ourselves, so we cried out to God. God heard our misery, brought us out with tremendous miracles and a mighty hand, and physically brought us to this exact spot, a land flowing with milk and honey. Really think about the power of this moment. The farmer is literally holding the physical produce of the land in their hands, the tangible proof of that promise, while reciting the history of their own people's starvation and slavery. It's incredibly grounding.
Okay, let's shift gears. Section 3, the third-year tithe. Right after the first fruits, Moses shifts focus entirely. Verses 12 through 15 introduce a completely different agricultural law based on a specific time cycle. Every third year, the farmer actually changes the destination of their offering. Now, in normal years, certain tithes go directly to the central sanctuary, but the third year, that is specifically designated as the year of the tithe, known in Hebrew as Ma'aser Ani, or the tithe of the poor. During this specific year, the produce stays right there in the local towns.
Why? To directly feed those in the community who cannot feed themselves.
Just to clarify here, the word tithe simply means a tenth, and in this specific third-year context, it functions as a societal safety net rather than an altar offering. Honestly, this was an absolutely revolutionary concept in the ancient Near East. At a time when extreme poverty and starvation were just an everyday reality, and there was absolutely no institutionalized government safety net to speak of, God is structuring the ancient Israelite economy so that caring for the poor is completely mandatory. The success of the wealthy landowner is directly, undeniably tied to the survival of the hungry.
Moses is extremely specific about exactly who receives this food. First, it goes to the Levite, because the Levite tribe wasn't given a territory of land to farm like the others. It goes to the alien, or the foreigner living among them, who obviously doesn't have ancestral land rights, and it goes to the fatherless and the widow, who completely lack the traditional family protection in that ancient society. And it doesn't stop there. The farmer has to declare before God that they have faithfully distributed this food, saying, "I have removed from my house the sacred portion. I have not turned aside from your commands." Actually, verse 14 is particularly fascinating. The farmer has to state that they didn't eat the tithe while mourning or while ritually unclean. Now, why on earth does that matter? Well, in ancient times, mourning involved contact with death, which imparted ritual impurity. God's harvest, and specifically the feeding of the poor, is entirely about life, vitality, and sustenance. You absolutely cannot mix the holy tithe meant for life with the aura of death. It has to be given with joy and purity. And once they've done all this, only then do they ask God to look down from heaven and bless your people Israel.
Which brings us to section 4, the mutual declaration.
As we conclude the chapter, verses 16 through 19 make this massive shift from agricultural rituals to an incredibly powerful two-way covenant between the people and God. Moses tells the people that today is the day to commit to these decrees with all their heart and soul. These final verses basically act as the formal ratification of a treaty. You've got both sides making these solemn, binding promises to each other. It is a breathtaking moment of mutual chosenness.
Notice the beautiful, perfect symmetry of this agreement. On one hand, Israel is pledging total obedience. They declare the Lord is their God, they promise to walk in his ways, keep the laws, and obey his voice. In response to that, God makes an incredible pledge back. He declares Israel is his treasured possession, he promises to elevate them high above the nations in praise, fame, and honor, and he commits to making them a holy people. It's not a one-sided dictatorship. It is a reciprocal relationship based entirely on action, mutual respect, and profound loyalty.
All right, section 5. Key ideas and clarifications.
Now remember, throughout this entire explainer, we are looking strictly at the Peshat. This is the simple, historical reality of agrarian Israelites dedicating their literal physical harvest to God and to the needy. We really don't need to add hidden layers or deep mystical interpretations to find profound meaning here. The literal actions themselves, giving away your first produce and feeding the hungry in your local town, teach us exactly how to build a just and holy society, plain and simple.
See, the text works brilliantly on two levels simultaneously. While the physical actions are completely bound to ancient agriculture, like, carrying a basket of fruit to an altar, distributing grain to widows, or reciting an ancestral script, the underlying values reveal a highly ethical society. The actions themselves reinforce that God is the true owner of the land, and we are merely stewards. They enforce the idea that true holiness isn't just prayer, it means physically providing for the poor. And most importantly, by forcing the farmer to remember that they were once wandering and enslaved, historical memory actively prevents arrogance and entitlement when they finally do achieve comfort and success.
Finally, section 6, lessons and quick recap.
So you might be wondering, if I'm not a farmer living in the ancient Near East, what does Deuteronomy chapter 26 actually have to do with me? Well, even if we aren't out there harvesting wheat or pressing olives, the core principles behind these verses are deeply, profoundly relevant to how we improve ourselves, check our egos, and build our modern communities today.
The key takeaways from this chapter translate perfectly to the modern day. First up, active gratitude. When you achieve success, perhaps you get a big promotion or a new opportunity, take your modern-day first fruits and acknowledge the higher source, the mentors, and the community that helped you get there. Don't ever claim you did it all on your own. Second, historical humility. Remember your roots. Remember the wandering Aramean in your own family tree, the struggles your parents or grandparents faced, to keep your ego firmly in check. Third, take real, tangible responsibility for the vulnerable. We have to actively build safety nets for the marginalized in our own towns, because a society is truly only as holy as how it treats its weakest members.
And finally, recognize that any relationship with the divine is a mutual commitment requiring real-world, everyday action.
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.